Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to the second lecture of microprocessor theory and interfacing. My name is Engineer Jafar Ali and I will be your instructor for this course. Today is our second lecture. Let's start with a recapitulation of the previous lecture. In the last lecture, we have studied about the basic introduction of microprocessor. We have studied that what are the basic fundamentals of microprocessor. We after that we look over about at the differences between microprocessor, microcomputers, and microcontrollers as well. We learned about all the small differences or the major differences between all of these terminologies. After that, we started about the evaluation of microprocessor, that how the basic microprocessor evolved from the first one that was developed by Intel 4004. The name of that processor was 4004, and what are the differences between that processor and how it was developed, and now what we are using nowadays. What are the main differences between the first one and the latest one. After that, we discussed about many several applications of microprocessor, that how microprocessor in use in every aspect of science and information technology, in computer, from medical health sciences to security, from industrial point of view, from manufacturing point of view, for anything, how microprocessors are recognized and implemented in most of the scenarios. After that, we talked about the basic architecture of any microprocessor. We learned that for a basic microprocessor to be efficient, we need to have some kind of architecture that is kind of secure, that is kind of simple to build, and that is more efficient to work on. So we learned about the basic microprocessor architecture, that is basically the bus architecture. That what is bus, we discussed about the last we will continue that topic in this class as well, that how a basic architecture of microprocessor, which we studied, that it's the basic architecture is known as bus architecture. Now how this bus architecture is really implemented in the microprocessor field and this topic. The today's So today we will be learning about the basic architecture of any microprocessor. If you learn this topic, you can easily understand any implementation of any microprocessor. Similar to that, related to that topic, we will be learning about the types of buses that is used in the development of this microprocessor architecture. And after that, we will go in deep in the depth, that how we can communicate with this microprocessor, and for that we will learning about different languages in this course. So I will try to increase the breadth of this topic specifically, just to let you know about all the major computer languages that are used nowadays, specifically in the field of microprocessor. And after that, we will be learning about memory, that is a very important component of any microprocessor or any microcontroller or any microcomputer. You know that how the memory affects the performance of any electrical or electronic device nowadays, and every electrical or electronic device needs some kind of microprocessor or microcomputer controller, excuse me, to maintain its performance. Now, starting with the architecture of microprocessor, in the last lecture we studied about the bus architecture of any microprocessor, that how this bus architecture helps us to understand, to grow, to understand. In the last lecture, we discussed about architecture of microprocessor, that how a bus architecture can be helpful in any implementation. We know that there are several components of any microprocessor, but to maintain a performance of microprocessor, we need to have the connection between all of the components. These components includes clock frequency generator or ALU or register unit, that is basically a kind of memory, but that is temporary. Similarly, we need a RAM, we need a ROM, we need some input ports, and so we need some output ports. So you see that all these devices or components inside the microprocessor needs to be connected with one another, and for that we have developed a scenario. We have reached to a conclusion that a micro bus architecture is the most feasible architecture in terms of the connectivity, in terms of the simplicity, in terms of the cost. So you see there are three major types of buses. Let's start with what is bus. Basically, bus is a cable or a channel through which data can flow from one component of microprocessor to another component of the same device, or you can call it another device as well. These bus carries information or your data or your signal inside it. So depending upon the functions of the bus, they are classified in three major types. The first one is basically known as address bus. The second bus is basically data bus, and the third bus is basically control bus. Now we will look in depth that what these buses actually do. On the data bus, the information that is basically the address which is flowing from one direction to another direction, but this direction is only one. You cannot alternate or change the direction of the flow for this kind of buses. If you want to store, if you have stored some data in any external device, for example, or any internal memory, and you want to apply some function on it, so you ask the ALU, that is arithmetic logic unit of that is another basic component of any microprocessor, and you ask ALU to perform some function on that specific data, and that data is stored in another memory. So the address bus actually carries the information about that memory on which the data that you have actually stored, and you want to apply some function on it. So in that capacity, this address, this bus actually carries the address of that specified data that you want to work on. Similarly to that, the address bus carries the actual data as along its path. In talking about the processor of 8085 specifically, this bus is typically 16-bit long, and it goes from A0 to A15. That means there are 16 addresses buses in the 8085A microprocessor. So you see that now we have we have left with 16-bit long address. It means the possible combinations that we could reach at the memory is 2 power 16, that is 65536, 65,536 different addresses you can reach from these 16-bit long address bus in 8085A microprocessor. And a memory location or any input output device can be represented by each one of these addresses. You have the option of about more than 65,000 addresses, and from using these address bus you can manipulate or take any data from that 65,000 address locations. Now coming towards the operation of a data bus, there are basically three steps in which the address bus of microprocessor operates. The first step is when the microprocessor wants to transfer some information between itself and a certain memory on any input output device. It generates that 16-bit address, and this 16-bit address is taken from the same 65,000 addresses, and you see that it is mentioned over here that the address is taken from internal register on its 16 pin address pins, which then appear on the address bus. So using that address pins, you can actually reach to the information that is allocated at one of the 65,000 memories. So the first step is basically you need to have that information about the location of that data that you want to access. The second step is basically that these addresses that are bits actually are decoded to determine the desired memory location on the input output devices, that on which location physically this memory is stored or this data is stored. The second process is basically decoding, and for this decoding you need to have some logical circuit designs like gates, etc., you need to have some decoders in your microcomputer system. The third step involved in the operation of address bus is basically the logic circuit decodes the address to decide that which input output device or memory equation is required to be involved in the any data transfer operation. If that data that you want to reach is associated with any other function that is also the father or the parent of that data, and you need to have some ownership, so for that you have to take that into account too. If the data is public, you can access it easily, but if the data is private or in the ownership of any private owner, so you need to involve that user or that address or that location too in the process of decoding that data and taking the data from that location as well. Now coming towards data bus, as the name shows that this bus actually carries the data and instead of the information or of addresses, this actually carries these particular data that you want to process or analyze or do any kind of stuff, this is a set of lines similar to the address bus, but information that is carried on this bus is the actual data. In 8085 there are 8 data bus which are used, that means from D0 to D7 actually there are 8 address data bus in the 8085 A microprocessor, but you need to have some combination or some precaution for using these data bus. You can access only one device as output on this data bus to avoid collision. If you are using this data bus to give some output to a specific memory, let's say you have connected this microprocessor with the LCD, and there are two different components that wants to send their output on the LCD screen. So there will be a collision on the LCD screen, and the LCD will not be able to decide that which particular image it should display. So to avoid that collision, you need to have a single entity that is controlling the output of that device. You need to have only one output device at a single time to avoid that collision. Unlikely address bus, this data bus actually carries the data or information in both the direction, not in single direction, and that is why this is known as bidirectional data bus, also known as BDB. You will be hearing this BDB a lot in the future if you are going towards industrial automation or any industry that works on the automation or similar stuff. So this BDB will be the term you will mostly listen to, and this is basically bidirectional bus. Similarly, in Intel 8085A microprocessor, the lower 8 bits, that is the lower 8 bits of the address from A0 to A7, are basically time multiplexed with this 8-bit data, that is D0 to D7, and therefore this bus is called as AD bus. Moving on towards the control bus. The control bus is comprised of a very single lines that carries control signals. You see that you need to have some control over these addresses bus and control bus. Some entity or some body should be carrying some data about the control, that which device is operating at which particular instant of time. So for that you need to send some signals to the devices that now you can operate, and now you can send the data to coordinate or to communicate between these devices. You need to have a control bus, and this control bus is also performing the synchronization of different microprocessor elements that are involved, as I have already told you. So also the timing control is also managed over here in the control bus that is used by the and the device, basically the clock, the component of a microprocessor, that is clock, that is basically maintaining the time, that is producing the time. And on these control buses the control signals are actually sent and received by different or towards different components of a single microprocessor. And using these signals you can identify or any memory location to read, write, or both from input device and this bus is also basically BCB, basically bidirectional control bus. This is also bidirectional bus. And why this bus is kept bidirectional? Because if you are transmitting or you are sending the data, let's say, to an output device, and some error occur, you forgot to save that information before sending, and you have no record left with yourself. So there should be some entity that could interrupt that transmission and send that microprocessor the signal that stop sending further data towards the output device. We need to have some we need to save that data first. And if the bus is single directional, unidirectional, so you will not have the control to interrupt that transmission. So for that you need to have a bidirectional bus, and that is why the control bus is actually known as bidirectional control bus. So let's summarize about all these topics. A microprocessor can perform all the functions that a CPU can do. See, microprocessor is a combination of memory, some input-output devices, and a clock is essentially a microcomputer. Now, how these devices understand our command. The second part or the second phase of our lecture is basically the computer language, that how we can communicate with these microprocessors as a layman or as a technical person. So for that you need to understand the basics of computer language. I hope that you have learned about C++, about Java, HTML, basic HTML, etc. In previous semesters, but to recap that information and that study, let's start with the basic introduction, that what is computer language. So every machine has its own set of instructions, and these instructions are based on the design of its microprocessor. If a microprocessor understands higher computer language, so you need to code the instructions in a higher coding language and higher level language. And if the microprocessor are some kind of old processor, so you need to have the knowledge about the low level languages of the computer. So to communicate with the computer, one must give instruction in binary language or machine language, the form in which the device or the processor can understand and store that information or data into its memory. And normally these are basically binary 0 and 1. Since it is difficult for users to write any program in terms of binary, if I tell you to write my recorded lectures in binary, so it will be much difficult for you as well as for me as well, because we do not have that sharp command on binary conversion of our data into binary. So we will be needing a lot of time and effort to make our information into binary, and for that we need the help of any compiler or any program that converts our layman language into computer language. And basically that is basically known as code. You need to write a code, and to compile that code you need to have some compiler, and to run that code you need to have some debug and for troubleshooting as well. So if you are progressing in the field of microprocessor or any its relevant field, you will need to understand the basics of that language, and starting with a very basic language, that is mnemonics. You can see the examples over here, that you can use add for addition, sub for subtraction, JMP for jump, etc. And users can write these programs, and this is basically the assembly language program, and this language is basically the assembly language. This is a very basic language, and you see that these terms are basically known as mnemonics, that add, sub, jump, move, etc. We will be looking in the further details in our coming slides, that how we actually use these instructions to execute our specific or desired task. So what is assembly language? Since the microprocessor only execute the bit patterns, that is either 0 or 1s of any machine language instructions, the assembly language program must be converted into machine codes. We write our program into assembly language, and after that we need to convert that assembly language into machine codes, that is in binary. And you can use several programs for that. Special programs are available for each type of microprocessor. Specifically, if I tell you about Atmel, they are using a Microsoft Vision Kyle, that is a specific program to convert different languages into machine codes. I will recommend you to go and have a look over that. I will also put a link in the description if you want to look at that program. And these programs are basically known as assemblers, and they run either on a microcomputer and a mini computer of this ALP, that is assembly language program. You see that if you have written a assembly language program and you have given it to a specific microprocessor and using a specific program, and that program has converted your assembly language to a machine code, but that machine code will be only executable on that specific microprocessor or device. If you shift to another device, that similar code, machine code that you have got from the last microprocessor, that executed code will not be working over here. The output will not be working over here, and the reason is because the difference of microprocessor. So this is the basic limitation, that you have to rewrite every program if you are changing your device, your microprocessor, and this is a major drawback. And to overcome that limitation or drawback of assembly language programming, and several programs have come into the market, like Basic, Photon, Pascal, PL, C, C Sharp. These are all basically are devised just because to cope that problem that we were facing from ALP. I have given you an assignment over here, that you have to write an article about the difference between LLP, that is low level programming, and HLP, high level programming. You will be writing a detailed article with examples, and you have to submit that online on the portal. Now coming towards the last section, and that is very important of today's topic, that is memory. Memories are basically the most important part in any microprocessor or any electronic device. It is basically storage device that actually stores your instructions, your data, your addresses, and anything. You need to have a large or huge data storage bank with yourself in the coming days. There are two kind of memory actually, basically semiconductor memories and the magnetic memories. Semiconductor memories that we are using nowadays, like SSD, etc., they are quite faster, they are smaller, they are lighter, and they are more durable, and they also consume less power, because the use of semiconductors, we have studied about electronic devices in the second semester, the course that I have taught you about electronics, and we saw that how semiconductor basically outclasses the previous state of the art methods that used different magnetic memories. So in keeping that in mind, semiconductor memories are also more durable and more reliable as compared to the old methods, that was magnetic memory like floppy disk and CDs, etc. Those were all magnetic memories. So let's see how the memory actually works. Let's start with an example. Let's say you have n words of information, and each word in that information, that word is carrying m bits. So the total memory will be n cross m. Let's say you have 8 words, and each word is basically carrying the information of 4 bits. So you will be needing the location that you will be needing will be 8 cross m. Let's say we have the memory location of 8, because you want to store that 8 words starting from 0, 1, 2. This is basically 3, not 2 over here, and this is basically 4, and that is 5, 6, 7. You need to have 8 different locations, and this is basically the content that's stored on that specific location. It means at location 0, the message stored is termed as M0. at location 1, the message, that is the word that is stored on that location, will be termed as M1, and similar, and the list goes on. In the last, the word that is stored on the 8th location will be termed as M7. The equivalent decimal representation of that memory is written over here in this block. And you see, if you want to access that information later on, you will need 3 basic data addresses bus if you want to access the data, because you are using 8 bits and you know that 2 power 3 is 8. So basically you need a combination of 3 bits addresses bus, and it means from A, if you are using 8085 and you are having A0 to A15 total 16 addresses bus, so you will be needing only 3 to access that data that is stored in these locations. Moving forward, addresses are formulated by the combination available in the wires known as address lines, as I already told you. And if you see that there are 8 memory locations, you will be needing 3 addresses, A0, A1 and A2. Let's say if you have 16 different, you have stored data and that data was large enough and you have used 16 memories. Now to use these to access these 16 memories, you will be needing 2 power 4. That it means that you will be needing A0, A1, A2 and A3 along with that. So for 16 unique addresses, you will be needing 4 address bus actually. And if you want to have, let's say if you have the word, and for example, let's say there are 15 words instead of 16. So now the question arises that either we go for a 4 addresses bus or either we go for 3 addresses bus. So the answer to that question, you will go for 4 addresses bus. You will keep a higher, and the last bit, that is the 16 wire, will be used as a dummy, or you can say it will be used for none. So we also want to make things reliable, and for that we do not want to lose any data. If you are using 3 buses, actually in the case of 15 words, you can only access 8 different locations. So the data is stored in location 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. That will be not accessible to us if you are neglecting this A3. So always go for higher to ensure the reliability of your device. Now coming towards the capacity, as I've told you that you have the quantity of addresses bus in 8085 is normally 16 bits. So you can access about this much of locations if you are using 8085 microprocessor. And if you are going for any other processor, so you can easily find, you can put the value of instead of 16, you can put any value over here, and you will find the actually memory location that exists on that microprocessor. Now how does this data is actually stored in that microprocessor? So I hope that you have learned about flip-flops in the previous, but don't worry, we will revise that as well in this class. So basically a flip-flop is a simple device that stores a single bit in a form of either 1 or 0, that is or high or low. And D flip-flop is basically the simplest flip-flop that actually stored that bit or that information in a form of a bit. So you see the diagram over here, this is basically a simple ambidexter. And basically what is a register? Let me tell you before starting this topic. Let's start with what is register. So a register is basically a combination of 8 flip-flops starting from 0 to 7. They are basically 8 flip-flops that are placed in cascaded form, and each one of them stores a single bit. This is termed as basically a register in which there is from starting from 0 to 7. There are 8 different flip-flops, or you can say a buffer, and that buffer or flip-flop stores the actual bit in that specific buffer. That is a temporary memory, and this register is a combination of 8 of that flip-flops. So this is basically a register. You see that starting from Q0 up to as much as you want, as the input data is basically stored at the active edge of the clock. If the clock goes high, input coming from any specific line will be stored. If the clock is down and the data is coming in, so it will not store that data. For storing the data, you need to set the clock at higher level. Means you have to give the pulse to this clock input, so that at that instant the value which you will be getting will be stored at that instant. If you remove that clock later on, the latest or the last information that came from this line over here will be stored over here, and this will not be overridden. And if you want to override that, you need to give a higher pulse again on this input, and the latest value that will be coming from this line will be recorded or stored over here. So this is a basic structure of any memory device or any flip-flop. Here is the working principle of how this flip-flop actually, or this register actually works. Now coming towards the types of memory, there are basically 3 types of memory. Now coming towards the types of memory, so there are basically 3 types of memory. You can see that there is a primary memory, there is a processor memory, and there is a secondary memory. A processor memory is actually the set of internal registers that that are basically the buffers that are used for temporary storage, that is not permanent, and that registers hold the results temporary. If you reset that microprocessor, so all the data will be vanished and you will be left with nothing. So this is not reliable for if you are using some you have important task. So it is not recommended to store your data on the temporary basis. And what is primary memory? This is the main memory actually and this is basically external memory, and this actually stores both the program and data. If you have written a program or instruction code, so this memory can hold both the data as well as the program in itself, and this information about this program and this data can be accessed by the microprocessor using address bus or data bus when it comes to the operation of a microprocessor. I've written over here using the buses. Basically the processor can access these memories directly, but using the buses, and the use of bus will be involved in that communication. In the earlier days, the primary memory was basically the magnetic core bus, but in modern days you see that due to the induction and evolution of semiconductors, mostly MOS that is metal oxide semiconductor technology is employed in the primary memory design. Now coming towards the secondary memory, secondary memory actually refers to the storage medium compositing of slow devices such as hard disk or floppies, etc. These are basically secondary memories. The primary memory is the most important memory because it is the backbone of your device. Now coming towards the characteristics of memory, memory can be classified into volatile and non-volatile. Volatile is that memory that if you refresh your system or you reset your system, the memory will be vanished and you will not be able to recover that memory. And what is non-volatile memory? That memory that do not vanish with the reset, whether you set the system or you restart the system, it doesn't vanish, it will be there, it will be available for you. Now coming towards the access time. Access time is the time taken by the microprocessor to access that specific memory that has stored some function or some program in itself. So if it is the average time that is taken by any microprocessor to access any memory location. If a microprocessor is taking much time to access a memory and to search
amongst the memories to find its required destination. So it is not a good microprocessor and is not recommended to use, because most of the delay will be caused in the searching process of that microprocessor while it's searching for the address that is that has some data or information of the required task. The second term is basically the cycle time, and is the average time that is between two successive read-write operations. If you have performed a task and you have applied for another task, so the average time between them, if a microprocessor is very fast, it can process it will never be stuck in a queue. It will keep processing the read and write operations in a regular manner. But if a microprocessor gets too old and it's not a good one, so it will cause a delay. After one completion of one read operation, it will take a lot of time to reestablish itself to be able to do another access process. So this is basically two terms which you will be learning, you will be listening in the field. The third important property is basically the access mode. Either you want to access the memory random or you want to go sequential. Now both have their own advantages and disadvantages. So in random access mode, any memory location can be accessed, but in sequential access mode, the access will go from higher to bottom, or from in the opposite manner, but you will have to wait for that. Let's say if you are accessing a data that is in the bottom of any stack basically memory which takes the input and put it at the very bottom, takes another memory, takes another data and put that into the top of the previous memory. So basically this is first in and last out memory, and you are using sequential access mode. Now if you want to access that data that you have inserted at the very start, so you will have to go from all the way up to the bottom, and it will take a lot of time to reach your particular destination. So this is basically sequential access mode. And the last important property that is used to assess any microprocessor, the performance of microprocessor, is basically the cost, that how much it cost per bit, and basically it is it is taken expressed in a dollar per bit, that how much you are going to pay for per bit, how much dollar you are going to pay for per bit. Now coming towards the classification of memory based on the access methods, we have classified these into two classes. Basically the first one is random access memory. As I have already told you that you will be accessing the data randomly, and it will vary. It is quite fast as compared to sequential access memories. If you are using a large addresses data banks that carry some addresses information, so basically RAM is further classified into read-only memories, or MWs, and read-write memories, etc. The second part of your assignment, this is basically the second part of your assignment, that you have to write at least 3 to 4 lines in each about each of the following. This is very easy, and these are the terms that you have already learned about in your computer fundamentals, your DLD. This is now your third course that you will be looking at these terms. So this will be a quite easy task for you to write about these terms, write about the specifications of these terms, and be brief. When just 2 to 3 or 5 lines, maximum 5 lines will be enough to express all these terms independently and separately. So this is all for today. If you have any further questions regarding in this topic, kindly write down that questions with yourself. We will discuss that questions in our Zoom class. And if you face any difficulty understanding any topic, you can email me as well. I've mentioned my email over here. That's all for today. Thank you very much.